Hello, hello! Once again, it is another day, another episode of USk Talks. Hello, everyone. Hi, sketchers from all over the world. Woo! Here we go again. Wow, I'm looking at the comments. Wow, you know what? Every time I feel tired at the end of the weekend, it's USk Talks time. For me, it's 11 p.m. coming to you live from Hong Kong. And I look at the comments and I see all of you like typing in and saying where you're from. Karen Moore from Los Angeles. I see you every week. Thank you so much. Elisa from Italy. Oh, yes, I remember all these names. Anne Marie. I mean, some of you, like, you're on every week. It's like seeing friends. It means so much to us on the USk Talks team. Thank you so much for tuning in, connecting all the sketches around the world from couch to couch, from my couch to your couch. Welcome everyone to another episode. Okay, I'm gonna start it off with my question of the week. I'd like to ask you all today, do you ever feel like there is a story you want to tell through sketches and you feel compelled to tell that story? Like it's buzzing, it's like a bee in your bonnet. It's buzzing around and that idea keeps popping up again and again. If you do, let me know in the comments, like what kind of sketch story is in your head that you want to tell? Just really quickly, let's see. While I'm looking through to see who's here and what and where you're from, just tell me really quickly. I just want to see a few comments. What kind of sketching story do you want to tell? Miranissima from Chile. Wow. And Martis from Germany, from the French Atlantic. Oh, hi, Rohit. From India, Christina. Hi. Riff Dixon from Brooklyn. From Lisbon, Portugal, Virginia, Anaga Chitale. Wow, it's cool. Joy, hi. How are you? Oh, you're still in Newfoundland. Okay, I hope it's not too cold up there for you. Stephen Whitehead from England. Eileen from San Francisco. Hello. Oh, Alexandra with a big heart. Hi. Okay, so let's see. Allison Hall just said, history of our community. Esther talks about craftsmen. Very cool. Let's see. We've got some interesting things coming up. Stephen Whitehead's talking about family history. Allison says history of our community. Sketching stories. Susan's talking about sketching story about the perils of working from home. No, that's going to be interesting. Okay. I see some very interesting topics. Remember, all of you, there is a reportage grant from Urban Sketches, not from USk Talks, but from Urban Sketches itself. There's a reportage grant. Closing date is the 1st of May. So if you have an interesting story you'd like to talk about, Perry Nealon, watching my husband figure out retirement. Okay, that's a good one. Propose something, propose something, write up a proposal, you email it to, actually, who do we email it to? Ludi in the back. Who do we email? Who do the proposals go to? Ludi is going to help us out. Put it in the comments so you know who to email it to. Oh, I see some food ideas. Hi, Myrtle. Adventures of Sea Turtles from Deb. Okay, lots of interesting ideas. We're looking forward to some really awesome ideas for the next round. So get ready to pull those in. Okay, today we have a fascinating story a couple of fascinating stories from you. These are also reportage proposal winners. We have stories spanning the globe. First up, we're going to have Chris from New York City. He is our sketcher insider. He's going to tell us what's happening in Broadway right now, in the theater environment and the performance art environment. A lot of you have heard about closures and things like that. He's got inside scoop. He proposed, he did a whole reportage proposal, did the sketches and everything. He's going to come on and talk to us about that. It's going to be very interesting to really understand what's happening in the industry from the inside. And then we travel all the way to Pune, India. I see some people from Pune in the comments. Hello. We're going to have then Priya, who's going to talk to us about this ancient craft, Coppersmiths. You've seen the promos. Coppersmiths Alley. It's a 400-year tradition that's been in Pune for some time. And working with copper has been around for thousands of years in human history. So she's going to talk to us and tell us about why, how did she start discovering this? How did she start drawing this? What pulled her to this particular project? Okay. Lots of interesting to dive into. So first up, let us invite Chris from New York. Hello, Chris. How are you?
Hi, everybody.
Hello. Chris, which part of NYC are you in? Was it in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I live in Brooklyn.
Oh, nice. Okay. Do you happen to have a view of the city? Where you're from?
Not from where I am.
I visited New York the first time in 2018, and when we crossed over to Brooklyn side, and from the bridge looking at the city and all that, it's beautiful. I love New York City. My wife and I were there for a week, and like we can't wait to go back. It feels we feel connected to the New York vibe very much. Bustling Hong Kong.
And hopefully in the near future, people can travel more easily. If you come to New York City, I'll tell you, we're going to be showing a lot of my sketches are in Times Square. A lot of people come to New York and they go to Times Square and like, I hate New York City because Times Square is like crazy and crowded and everything. But if you go across the bridge into Brooklyn or to Queens or the other parts of the city, it's like so much more to Times Square. When people come to Brooklyn, they're like, oh, I love New York City. This is great.
Yeah. I actually love how diverse the city is. There's so many different things to see. And my God, the food is amazing. Everything we ate was just awesome. But anyway, yes, I sure hope that travel will return to normal soon and we can all, travel, meet each other and sketch in person. But now, coming to the meat of what you're going to share with us today. First up, let's put up Chris's Instagram info up on the screen so that everyone can see it. Here we go. All of you, that's Chris. That's his hero shot. That's such a cool picture. And that's Chris's Instagram, C Brown Sketch House with 2 H's. And underscore. Okay, so Chris, you just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about what you do and your urban sketching journey. How did you start urban sketching, and what do you do what's your day job, so to speak?
Okay, well, I started urban sketching. I mean, a few weeks ago, I think it was Terry who was on the program who talked about how he was doing urban sketching before he knew what urban sketching was. I'm kind of the same way. I've been drawing, all my life, and I've been drawing urban sketching for a good long while now. It was about 6 or 7 years ago that I learned about the urban sketching movement and start to post social media, that stuff. For my day job, I work at the Museum of Modern Art.
MoMA.
Yeah, at MoMA.
For
a long time, for most of my adult life, I was working in theater and live performance as a lighting designer and a lighting technician primarily. 2 years ago, I was hired at MoMA. They've done a big expansion, and as part of that, they built a performance studio. So I'm part of the team that was hired to do lighting and other technical support for that part of the museum.
Okay.
So I'm still doing lighting, that's sort of lighting and entertainment technology, but I'm kind of out of the theater and live performance field.
Wow, that's so cool. And so you must have a lot of friends in the industry then.
Yeah.
In performance industry. That's okay. Before you dive into that story, can you explain to us, because I think some people may not be aware, what's Broadway, what's off-Broadway, what's off-Broadway?
Sure.
So we're straight to the terminology.
So, these terms are technically, they're kind of categories for union contracts, but for the layman, Broadway is when you think of like the big musicals and really those famous marquees, mostly centered around Times Square, which is the center of Manhattan. But in addition to that, there's dozens, if not hundreds, of other types of venues. Off-Broadway theaters, which are scattered throughout the city, off-Broadway, which are even further out. The technical terms have to do with like the seating capacity of the house and blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
But in general, like these off-Broadway places, a lot of times they're nonprofit organizations. They're not commercial ventures like the Broadway shows are. And they can range from very large venues to like very, very small in a basement or in a back room kind of venues.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that's...
most of my career was spent in those off-Broadway independent theaters.
Oh, that's great, because the vibe in those kind of places, I mean, I've heard about it. I would love to go and see some shows. And the next time we can get to New York City, I'm going to rely on you for some great recommendations.
Okay.
Yeah. So, well, I can understand then why you feel so strongly about this project. And for those of you who are not aware, Chris has been documenting what the Broadway scene has been like, the performance scene is like now. So tell us, after the pandemic hit, with the lockdowns and all that, how have people been managing? What's been happening with Broadway?
Well, I mean, it's really rough for everyone. It was Friday the 13th, March 13th of last year, when the word came down that everything was shutting down. Broadway, all performance venues, the sports stadiums, the museums shut down. And at that point, everyone thought like, oh, so we'll be closed for a couple, they were saying we'll be closed for a few weeks. And everyone thought, well, that really means a month. Now it's a year later. And the thing about the shutdown for this industry, is that people are out of work. But it's not like they've just lost their job. They've lost their entire industry.
Right.
When I was in that world, I would sometimes lose a job or lose a gig, or someplace I worked shut down, and I could just go to another venue, or I could do related work, like live conferences, social gatherings. Like I worked for a company that did a lot of birthday parties and bar mitzvahs and weddings, corporate events. But all that stuff, anything that involves large gatherings of people, is not happening. The other thing that's really important to understand, that people probably don't understand, is that a large part of this industry is freelance. It's not like a job where you clock in and you have job security. You're on that show. Maybe that show runs for a couple of years, or maybe it runs for a weekend, and then you're on to the next gig. So vast portion of the...
That's something that a lot of people wouldn't have known. Okay.
Right.
Yes. So it basically, the show survives and you've got a job. Once it's gone, next contract.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Then it's so devastating right now then, because everything is closed.
Yeah. There's kind of two aspects to it. Is that the companies, the venues themselves, are struggling because they need to, bring in income from an audience. And then the people who work there, even if a place has a permanent staff, they're certainly supplementing it with a lot of freelance labor. And so on both ends is a struggle to survive.
Right. Okay.
And the other thing I think a lot of people don't realize is, like, you think about the show, and there's the performers, obviously, who are also out of work, but there's hundreds of people that you don't see: the technicians, production people, the people who take tickets and sell tickets in the box office.
Right.
And there's these ancillary industries, companies who supply the lighting equipment, sound equipment, build the scenery, build the costumes,
right? Yeah.
Maintain all of that, who drive the trucks that bring the stuff to your theater.
Yeah.
So
put the posters
up.
A
whole number. There's like hundreds of people that you're not, general person is not aware of,
right?
Who are also really affected by this.
And what's happening, like, with friends you have in the industry now? Like, how are they managing?
I I mean, they're managing as well they can. I think by this point, people have kind of hopefully found their way to survive, and they're still waiting for that industry to come back. A lot of people have found kind of other employment that will keep them afloat, and hoping the industry comes back. A lot of people have left town. I know several people have like left and gone to maybe where their family is, or they found a job outside the industry somewhere, because they're at this point we're a year in, and there's no real indication of when these performances can resume. It's like, how long can you wait for your whole industry to reappear?
To come back. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's been over a year. That's true. Well, the sketches you've been doing are really so poignant. And did you do many of these during the lockdown? Because I mean, it's like, have you intentionally showcased like just the venue without the people in them?
Right. So I started this project into the period of the lockdown. Initially, when everything was locked down, including MoMA, I was at home, primarily working from home. And in the late summer, some places started to reopen. I started going back into work at MoMA to sort of prep for our eventual reopening. At that point, MoMA is located near Times Square. So I would go for a walk on my lunch break or downtime. And I had the idea of doing a series on theaters and performance spaces for like a long time. Like, I've got like lots of ideas of things that I'll do someday, And so as I was walking around and through Times Square in particular, it was so surreal, because it was, anyone who's been to New York, has been to Times Square, knows what a crazy madhouse it is. And it was empty. It's empty like a movie. Wow. And then seeing all these theaters, which are usually, even if it's not showtime, there's people around to buy tickets, to load in and load out scenery and lights and yada yada, to see them all sitting there waiting like in status was like really striking. And then I thought to myself, like, maybe this is the time to do that series. The other thing that was really important to me when I start to think about this, like I said, most of my work has been done not on Broadway. Like, I've never been on Broadway. Don't like, I don't want to talk myself up like I'm a big Broadway star or anything. All my work is done like elsewhere. So I really want to include the rest of these venues that are in the city. A lot of them, you'll see in a lot of these sketches, a lot of them really help me out by telling the story through their marquees out front. A lot of these places put up messages that were hopeful or defiant, or see you later, or we'll be back, like, stay strong, New York. And that was really poignant for me, that was these places were still trying to reach out to the people.
Yeah,
this is a big theater. It's near me in Brooklyn. It's an old vaudeville house that was just a few years ago, was renovated and hosts lots of big acts. But now it's sitting there. They put this message out front, and the only people I saw around there that day was this homeless man who was using their awning as a shelter.
Yeah, what a contrast. What a contrast this is. I mean, this is such a telling sketch, because this is such a beautiful space. I can imagine when it's, when shows are on, it's like bustling, and I mean, you very nicely put that one homeless man, and that really tells the whole story. I mean, this is amazing. I mean, to just jump off a little bit, like, how long does it take for you to do a sketch like this one?
A sketch like this, I'll probably work maybe an hour or two. A lot of times I'll finish them, particularly color, off-site. I'll do all the drawing of it, figuring and kind of maybe some preparatory color on site,
Mhm.
particularly if it's like now it's very cold out. So I'll finish it later. And particularly stuff like if there's like a lot of text in there that I want to be precise, I will kind of notate that and come back to that later. But the bulk of it, like I do, depending on the complexity, maybe an hour or two.
Yeah, this is so intricate. I mean, it's beautiful. Can you show us, like kind of quickly, like what kind of size do you usually work at?
Okay.
What kind of scale are we
Sure.
looking at?
So this whole series is
that's familiar.
9 by 12
Okay.
inches, which is 23 by 30 centimeters.
Mhm.
Sometimes I work a little smaller, but that's kind of my usual size that
Okay.
I schlep around. And you'll see when we get some other, I did another kind of a parallel series of interviews later. We'll see I did a smaller size. This is 8 by 8, just a 20 centimeter square, which is nice because it's very Instagram friendly since it's a square format.
Yes.
And as for my tools, like really not very fancy. You know, like I bring a bunch of pencils.
Yeah.
Color, I usually do some watercolor and a lot of like water soluble pencils. These are Inktense, you know, regular old Micron pens. I got a handy water brush.
The water brush.
Very not fancy.
Okay. That's like a very nice compact toolkit. It's just enough to get things done. What do you sit on? Do you carry a chair with you? I'm just curious. Or do you just...
No, usually I find someplace to sit.
Okay.
Sometimes it's sidewalk. You know.
Okay. Yeah.
Find a stoop or a bench or sidewalk, a curb, you know.
Yeah.
It's always
cafe across the street, if there is one.
If it's open.
If it's open. Yeah. What's that like? I mean, I've seen, I watched the news and all that. Sometimes certain bits of New York, New Yorkers are saying, "What life is going on?" And things look okay. But some parts they look very quiet.
Yeah. I mean, things like restaurants and cafes. They're open for takeaway. Some of them have built these outside structures, and I'm still not super cool with going into those because a lot of times they're like enclosed structures.
Right.
Like, well,
ventilation.
Like, yeah, it's like you're outdoors, but you just built another indoor space outdoors. So,
right.
But yeah, like going to go and sit in a coffee shop and draw out the window. It's not seems like it was forever ago that I could do that. But that's not a thing that's happening now.
Okay, well, let's take a look at some more artwork. This is stunning, and it's one of the few theaters that I actually went to in New York. This is beautiful in Brooklyn. You are really good at this intricate work, capturing that kind of detail.
Yeah. I get a lot of comments, especially about drawing bricks.
Yeah.
And people are like, people always say like, "Oh, it must take forever to draw those bricks," and actually it doesn't. I just draw some like horizontal guidelines, and I put on some music and kind of go into a fugue state, and like 5 minutes later, it's all there. Every time I always say I'm not going to draw every single brick. I'm just going to indicate it. But
yes. I understand what you mean. You just go in, you get into the zone, and before you know it, you're drawing every brick. But apart from the brick, like the decorative bits as well, all the trims and the finishes. I mean, that's really stunning the way you've captured all that.
Well, thank you. That stuff always. I mean, that's always the thing that captures my eye, like a building like this. And I guess one thing that I've learned. Especially recently, because I've been doing a lot of the buildings around MoMA have this sort of intricate decor. You asked me how much time I spend on the drawing. I also spend a lot of time looking before I draw. If you just sit down to draw something like that, you'll get lost and confused pretty quickly. So a lot of times especially something that complex, I'll sit there and kind of look and like, what am I looking at, and try and figure it out in my brain before I start to do it. Because when you do that, then the structure and the pattern slowly starts to reveal itself, and then you can see like, initially looking at it's like, oh, it's just stuff. But when you look at it, you can break it down and then say like, oh, okay, I get it.
That is an excellent point to make. Yeah. Okay. So tell us about some of these particular sketches that we're looking at.
So this place is Webster Hall, which is a music venue. It's mostly known these days for like rock and roll and punk bands. And this is actually just the stage door. One thing I found was like a lot of times the entrance or the main entrance or the marquee to a building or just general architecture was not so interesting, but then I would see like a side piece, like the stage door, a side entrance, which was more interesting to me. And this place, I mean, it's another place I'd walk past this many times and always thought, someday I'm gonna draw that, and so it worked itself into this series. And one thing that I liked about this piece was the graffiti on the door. I talked about how the marquees, people were sharing messages through their marquees, and here, part of that graffiti is like, it says like "Corona's gotta get me" or something like that. So it's along the same lines of all these marquee messages.
That's really. I love the way you capture that as well, because it captures it's not just any scene; it really marks it as this particular time.
And a similar experience with this place. This is a theater on the Lower East Side. The show called Stomp, which has been there for 20 years, I think. They've done 10,000 performances.
I've seen it. I love Stomp.
And that was another place I've walked past that theater hundreds of times. And so it's on my mental list. All these places are places that I'm familiar with. Either I've worked there, or I've seen shows there, or I've just walked past there. I've worked in this area, so I've walked past it a million times. And I would stand there, I'd kind of look, and I was like, it's not so interesting. And as I started to walk away, I kind of saw this like super exuberant sign, like, go see this show. And that combined with, you see the logo and the architecture it's actually a really old vaudeville. It was originally a Yiddish theater, the Yiddish theater district. And like this beer store right next to it, like all that kind of combined, like, oh, well, there's the image, and there's the story.
And it's an excellent composition as well. I mean, all those graphic elements, it really comes together so nicely. Okay, I have to ask you about the next one, because this looks like a theme park. It looks like a crazy ride, but it's not. So tell us what this is.
Okay, so this is Queen's Theater in the Park. Well, now it's just called Queen's Theater. When I worked there, I used to do quite a bit of work here about 10, 15 years ago. It was Queen's Theater in the Park. It's in the middle of Corona Meadows, Flushing Corona Meadows Park. I got the word order wrong, probably. Which is a large park all the way out in Queens, near a baseball stadium. It was the site of two World's Fairs, the 1939 and the 1964 World's Fairs. So there are some structures that are left over from this World Fair, including this, that the circular building in the foreground is where the theater's housed. And these structures in back were observation decks, and there's something that's big circular yellow pavilion. They're all part of this World's Fair where they show where companies and countries and nations and groups would display how great civilization was. And so there's all these things that are left over from that. People might recognize these towers in back from Men in Black. At the end of that movie, they go out there, those circular discs are revealed to be secret UFOs that the
Oh,
aliens were hiding out with.
I remember that scene. Okay.
And I was also in Iron Man 2.
Wow.
This was the setting for Tony Stark's big expo was this.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay. Wow, so much history, all in your neighborhood too. Well, close.
Well, this is actually pretty far away from Brooklyn. One thing people don't realize about New York City maybe is like how big and spread out it is. This is actually pretty substantial hike for me, but because of my personal connection, because I remember the how cool it was, I made the trek out there for this one.
Wow. Okay. Fascinating. I mean, when you started sketching all these buildings for your project, did you have an idea? Like, did you have a checklist? Okay, I need to do these and then go down them, or did you just walk around and be inspired?
A little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I started out, I was walking, I could walk around Times Square
Mm-hmm.
pretty easily, and it's all concentrated. So I could, like on my checklist, like Times Square, walk around, you'll find, I think there's 40 Broadway theaters. So you have your pick. All these other venues are places that I've worked or have visited or just know about from all my years in the industry. So I made a kind of a mental checklist, and I did a couple of scouting trips, to check them out, to see if they were as interesting as I remembered. A lot of times there are places where I'm like, okay, that place is going to be really interesting, and I would get there and be like, meh. And some other places where I was like, I don't know, but I'll go take a look, and something would reveal itself to me.
Okay, so what struck you about this place, TNC Gallery?
Yeah, this is a place called Theater for the New City. It's in the Lower East Side. One thing is the color is really striking, and the fact that in this First Avenue retail market, a lot of times they're like, you'll see these remnants of past uses of buildings. And one of the things I like to do is do a little bit of historical research, figure out what's going on. There's also this type of theater was important to include because this is not a Broadway theater. It's not commercial theater, kind of not even off-Broadway theater. They do a lot of stuff with the local community, a lot of kind of civic engagement groups. So that's another function that a lot of these arts organizations serve in our city.
Okay. All right. And this is a particular piece that you wanted to tell us about. So,
this is the smallest theater of my whole series. It's a place called the Wild Project. It seats, I think, like 89 people, which maybe sounds like a lot, but it's not. It's a tiny, tiny place. I think it was originally a bottle factory, this building.
Wow.
I believe it was renovated into a theater in like 2007. So this is a place I have a lot of personal connection with. I've worked there many times. I'm friends with the people who run it. It's a very small organization. I think currently there's like 2 people running it. And they're really, even in normal times, it's always like, can we make the rent this week? This month, can we get people in here? But they are like fighting so hard to stay open, stay connected, and they serve so many artists. So many artists come through here. It's a sort of place where, when I moved to New York in the late 90s, there were many, many, many little small theaters where people could just go and do a show. They were young. If they weren't so young, they could show up. They'd saved up a couple $100. They could like do a show, and people could just do theater or do a performance. And over the past 10, 15 years, most of these places have gone away. The economics are really hard. Real estate's so expensive. Someone would rather have a fancy boutique in the space rather than, some weird bohemian theater, right?
Right.
So this is a place that is still here and is still working really hard to make it through this pandemic. And it's a place that's dear to my heart. So that was a place that I really want to include in the series. Going from and also showing like the spanning from like the big place like Broadway and Lincoln Center and Carnegie Hall down to a place like this.
Sure. Yeah, I really appreciate the breadth that you have in this project, because there are names that we all recognize: Radio City Music Hall, Carnegie Hall, and places like that. And to bring our focus to this as well, I mean, how do little places like this survive now? How have they lasted for over a year?
It's a good question. People keep trying. People have been trying to move content online and live streaming to some success, a little bit of success. But that sort of experience is not the same as attending a live performance, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
There's been a little, some places will have helpful landlords. I know that this place, their landlords kind of letting them slide a little bit. They still have to pay the rent, but they're not in danger of eviction right now. There's been some support from private funders, and the latest legislation from our new administration for a pandemic relief includes the Save Our Stages Act, which is where I took the title of this series from, is Save Our Stages. And that provides some amount of government support to some theaters and businesses. So hopefully that will help some people get through.
Hope it trickles down, especially to these little places, because the larger ones, they're going to survive. It's tough for them, but it's these little places that really need the help the most.
For sure.
You were also saying that you've got I know you've done this series of interviews, talking to some friends and colleagues in the industry. So tell us about the interviews. How did you go about talking to these people, and what was it like interviewing them?
Well, they're mostly people that I know, either I've worked with or I'm just acquainted with, and everyone was really excited to talk about what was going on. This is Anna Mari, who runs the Wild Project, and she's been like very active in advocating for things like for more government support from the city and from the federal government for places like her theater. And she's I don't know if I would say she's optimistic, but has a very positive outlook, and she's really working hard to find ways to survive and to keep serving the artists who work in her organization. One thing that she put out that she's looking forward to is that there's the city is going to be. I told you about the restaurants are kind of opening up little shacks on the sidewalk,
Right.
and there's sorry, my wife is bringing me some water. There's going to be a similar program where theaters and performance venues can do ticket events like out on the street. Not sure how well that's going to work, but it's like something that venues can do.
At least they're trying something. And you've got all this on your Instagram, right? Because you were saying that the square format is good. So all those of you who want to read all the text, go check out Chris's Instagram.
Yeah.
So you've been interviewing actually quite a number of people.
Yeah.
And I really like this particular style you've got as well when you do the interviews. So did you like record the conversation and then write it all out, or did you just?
Yeah. I think there's one or two that I did kind of on the fly, but most of them I learned to record them and to edit it out the text and shape that. But the sketching was all, done
on
on
location.
site in place.
Okay.
This is like I said, there's a lot of ancillary industries that go along with the performance venue. This is a small lighting company that I've worked with for many years that services a lot of the off-Broadway and independent theaters. Again, it's like one or two people running this company, but this is a person who's been there, who saved my butt many times, and there are all these companies that supply the equipment, lighting, and sound. Not to get too much into the logistics of how productions work, but many of the production performances you see, theaters or concerts, all that lighting equipment and sound equipment and the scenery, that's all rented. That's all brought in. Like,
wow.
A lot of times you go to a theater, there's some institutions that are permanent that maybe have a permanent stock of equipment, but most places, all this stuff is brought in specifically for that performance or that production. So all that stuff comes from these other companies that specialize in a particular field. And again, they're not doing any business because there's no one doing shows. So they're all...
And I mean, looking at the series of sketches that you've done, there's a lot that we're discovering because we don't know so much about what's happening. What have you discovered doing all these drawings and like really diving into the, into the backstory of what's happening with the performance industry during lockdown?
One thing I've learned is like how resilient people are. I also learned how transferable a lot of our skill set is. Like the two images you just showed are these a designer and a technician that I know who have worked at this theater that does a lot of community engagement. So that whole theater has been kind of repurposed into being a food bank.
Wow.
They're located in an area of the city where there's a lot of low-income people. So basically, most of their staff of technicians and production people and artists have turned around to help distribute food.
Wow.
Using the infrastructure, the organizational infrastructure that they already have. And they all tell me like, yeah, my skills of bringing in all 2 trucks of scenery and 100 lights and all these speakers and like running a crew to make it all happen easily transfers to bringing in boxes and boxes and bags of food and distributing that. So that was interesting and inspiring to see.
Yeah, that is amazing. And it's really good to see that people are optimistic. I love that particular message. It's good to know.
So these are 2 designers I know. Really quickly, they also found ways to make a lot of people are also finding ways to capitalize on their creative spirit and their creative energies, even though they can't do their primary focus of theater. So like Daisy is a designer who I've known for a long time. She doesn't have very many theater projects to do, but she's working as a ghostwriter where people send her like these crazy ideas for like werewolf combat or vampire gladiators. She's like, okay, I'll write your story for you. And these 2 guys on the right are the Swatter brothers, who are identical twin set designers. That's why their text is color coded, because they do that classic twin thing of like finishing each other's sentences.
That's such a cool way to add that little element in.
And they are one of the things they've done 2 interesting things. One was they did one live performance that was in Florida, but it was on a street of storefronts that were closed up. And so in each storefront, there was a play about the 7 deadly sins. So each storefront had 1 or 2 actors inside, and the audience would walk down the street seeing each section of the play that was like broadcast to them outside. Like I was like, that was cool in an inventive way, but it's not really a thing that everyone can do. But people are finding ways of doing things.
Yeah, they're really pushing their creativity, and yeah, well, you have to survive, so adapt. People are adapting. I'm sure that a lot of people are having a hard time as well, but I'm glad to hear that there's some governmental help, and that people are finding ways or leaving the city for a while until things return to normal.
Right. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it
Mhm.
shakes out afterwards. I mean, I feel like people can
Mhm.
sort of see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel a
Right.
bit.
Yeah.
Uh, like things are trending in that way, but it's still going to be a really long road back.
Mhm.
So another thing people don't realize, I think, about theater and live performance is that it takes quite a while to plan and organize and mount a production. So even if tomorrow they say, "Listen, let's open all the theaters again," it's gonna be fine. It still takes several weeks, if not months, to
Yeah.
get all this going. Even the Broadway theaters, which are those shows have just been sitting there, still got to take them some time to ramp it all back up.
I can't imagine. It takes
So
a little time to warm up the engine, so to speak.
yeah,
Well, well, we hope that I'm sure everyone's hoping that things will improve really soon. That light, that little light at the end of the tunnel is coming closer. Um, well, that brings us to the end of this particular segment. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us, Chris. I mean, it's been
thank you.
really good, fascinating. A little cheers to you. Thank you for sharing your work with us and telling this particular story. Um, oh yeah, someone is saying this should be published. That's true too. Well, stick around and maybe chat with the viewers in the comments. There've been lots of people with very interesting, lots of people who lived in New York at some time, and yeah, I think they would love to have a little chat with you. So stick around and maybe chat with them while we continue with the next segment. So thank you again so much, Chris, and we'll chat with you another time.
All right.
Okay. All right, that was Chris from Brooklyn, New York, telling us about his whole project about saving stages and capturing what's been happening in New York City with the performance industry. If you've just joined us, thank you very much for tuning in. This is USk Talks. We're talking to some reportage proposal winners. We just talked to Chris from New York, from the US, and now we're going over to Pune, India, where we'll be talking to Priya, who has been doing this really interesting series on coppersmiths and the work that they do in this little alley in the middle of the city. And it's also really fascinating because Priya is a very, 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 very new urban sketcher. She sent us a proposal. She dived right in. She started sketching before she even knew what urban sketching was, or urban sketchers was. So let's call Priya up. Let's get her to join us. Hello, Priya. How are you?
Hi, Rob. I'm doing well. Thank you.
That's so good. I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you so much for joining us. You have done some really fascinating work. So to introduce you, would you please introduce yourself a little bit? Just tell us a little bit about what you do and um, your urban sketching journey. How did you start? I mean, I heard that you started in September last year.
Yes, that's true. Okay, so a brief introduction is I'm a self taught illustrator and a travel blogger. So I worked in a bank in the human resources, and then I've been engaged in art and more recently illustration since 2017. So
Mhm.
my illustrations is derived from Indian folk art. And so I'll tell you about how I started with urban sketching. There is this very sweet lady, Farah Irani, as part of the Urban Sketchers Pune. And she had conducted a workshop on urban sketching, and this was November 2019. So I happened to attend this workshop of hers, and that is how I got introduced to urban sketching.
Okay.
I did a few urban sketches after that, but not very actively. Since when I've been actively again urban sketching is since October 2020, when I started attending the Sunday meets organized by the Urban Sketchers Pune. So it's been 5 months.
Wow. Good for you.
Yes.
Yeah. What an example of diving right in and just getting into it. Awesome.
So it may be funny to say that now, but when I had submitted my proposal, I had not watched any of the USk talks. And I did not know, I'm sorry to say that, but I did not know you, I did not know Rita. So, so it
No.
was only after it was only after I got selected that I thought, okay, now this is serious. Now let me see what is the format of USk talks, and let me see what it is all about. So that's how it happened. But I'm in a happy place, and it's been a very enriching experience.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your proposal. I mean, I'm very heartened to see like the variety and that particular story that you've decided to tell us. Tell us how you discovered this Coppersmiths Alley and what made you decide to start telling that particular story. And before we jump into that, this is Priya's Instagram, so check her out at Purple Soul Art on Instagram. Okay, let's dive into the story of Coppersmiths Alley. How did this idea come about?
Yes, so I'll just give you a brief history of how the coppersmiths arrived in Pune. So,
Mhm.
but before that, the art of fashioning copper into different items and products that's been there in India since around 3,000 years ago. And they've even found copper coins and copper plates in and around Pune dating to around 2,000 years ago. But this is a community of coppersmiths who migrated from the western coast of India, the Konkan coast, to Pune around 400 years ago. This was in the later part of the 1600s, under the patronage of the Maratha Empire, the Peshwas, basically, who were prime ministers of the Maratha Empire. So they've been living and working in the same place in Pune since 400 years. So that is what makes it unique. When I read in the announcement that the reportage could include documenting a craft, so that is what caught my attention. And I have a very keen interest in traditional arts and crafts and textiles, amongst other things. So I knew right away that this is what I'm going to do. And
Mhm.
I had heard about the coppersmiths, or the tambats as they are called in Marathi, but I had not actually studied them, or I had not interacted with them. So I thought this would be a very good opportunity to utilize this project, and then study their work and life in depth. So that's how, and it's a very quintessential part of Pune, the Tambat Ali.
Mhm. So
So that's how.
explain to us what Tambat and Ali mean, just to
Yes,
clarify.
so Tambat in Marathi, which is a local language spoken here, Tambat is a coppersmith, and
Mhm.
Ali is an alley, the English word alley. So
Okay.
Tambat Ali.
Okay. And this would be an example in this particular sketch of the actual alley, the Ali, and the
Yes,
coppersmith. So you're saying Tambat is the coppersmith, correct?
yes, Tambat is a coppersmith.
Okay.
Yes. So
Okay.
as I said, the coppersmiths live and work in the same premises. So this is what I've tried to convey through the sketch. So there's this behind. It's not very clear in the photograph, but the dark space that you see beyond the door, that is a living space, and
Mhm.
where he's sitting and working is actually the ante room. And then there's a corridor, and there are these common washing areas, laundry areas, etc.
Mhm.
So this is what I've tried to depict in this, that they
How
work and
sorry, how large is the entire area, this whole alley?
uh, okay, I'm not sure in terms of the kilometers or the area, but okay, the Tambat Ali has different clusters of coppersmiths working together, and I happened to visit one particular cluster where all the craftsmen are coppersmiths.
Mhm.
But I've been told that there are other clusters nearby in the vicinity, but
Mhm.
they also work on other metals. So I did not, because I thought
Oh,
this particular cluster is very unique in the sense that all craftsmen work on copper. So I
okay.
visited them. So there are around 50 coppersmiths working where I visited.
Okay. Well, okay. So if is it like a literal alley where you can go like from one end to the other and walk down the entire alley and just visit
Yes,
the
there
whole.
are these small lanes. Yes, yes,
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
All right. I get it. So it's like little colonies of different kinds of craftspeople working in different metals.
yes.
Oh, very cool. Okay. All right. So diving into that, let's see. So this is another piece. Uh,
Yes. So the another unique thing about this is that this is it's the eighth or ninth generation of coppersmiths living and working in the same premises since the time they migrated to Pune. So here I have shown a sense of everything coexisting. You can see laundry drying on the clothesline, and then there's a coppersmith working. There are his tools, the hammers. There are two-wheelers parked, and footwear scattered around. Just behind the bicycle, there's a laundry area. So
Mhm.
everything coexists. And honestly, the first time I visited, there was a sense of chaos. Because one is not used to listening to high decibel noises on a daily basis. But once I settled down to sketch, I could actually see the beauty beneath the chaos. And so, two examples I would like to give you. One is that many times during the day, I observed that the coppersmiths would fall into this naturally orchestrated rhythm of the hammer beating on copper.
Oh,
So that was
wow.
almost like music and very nice to listen to. And that would happen many times a day, like an orchestrated music. And another example is of there were these shafts of sunlight streaming down through the cracks on the roof, and there was copper everywhere in different stages of completion. And the way the sunlight caught the copper and reflected the light, in different shades of red oxide or burnt sienna and yellow ochre. So that was very beautiful. So I
I,
realized that there is chaos as well as beauty coexisting seamlessly there. So that
wow.
is what I try to convey.
That sounds fascinating. I mean, you're taking me there visually in addition to your sketches as well. Okay, fascinating. All right. Tell us more about the actual process, what it's like for these people to actually live there and work there. And you were saying multi-generational as well.
Yes, I saw that there are extended families living and working together. So there would be cousins, there would be brothers, sons and fathers, and uncles and nephews. So the person I've sketched in the foreground of this sketch is a 71-year-old coppersmith called Dashrath Kharolikar, and he's 71 years old now. And he told me he's been working since the age of 9 years, since he was 9 years of age. So that's around 62 years he's spent, working as a coppersmith. So in
Wow.
the background, he's seen working alongside his nephew. So that's, it's a very labor intensive process, this craft of fashioning copper into different items.
Right. Okay. And are these items that are used on is it common? Like everyone has these things? Do lots of people buy the copper items?
Yes, in fact, I myself have a copper water dispenser in my house, and then I have a copper glass that I use on a daily basis. But
Oh,
depending on the size of the apartment, for example, there are these huge water heating units which are used to heat bathing water, water used for bathing. So
mhm.
that cannot be used in an apartment like mine. But people who have individual houses do buy. In fact, I've made a sketch on that, so maybe I'll expand a little bit more on that a little later.
Okay, we'll expand on that later. I'm sure. Tell us what is the story of this. I love the composition of this.
Thank you. So, the person in the foreground that I talked about in the previous sketch, the 71-year-old coppersmith. So,
Mhm.
I happened to be sitting around him, and suddenly he stopped his work and he showed me his palms, and with an expression that look at my palms. And I looked at his palm, and it was drained of blood. It was white and pale. And
Mm.
so that goes to show how hard it is to work on copper. And I thought that would make for a good composition, and also to convey this, the laborious process of copper making, and to hold the hammer almost the whole day, say maybe 8 hours a day. And it's a lot of bicep work, and not to mention the strain on the wrist and the forearm.
Oh, I can imagine. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm really impressed also with how you've just dove in with the variety in your sketches. To tell the story of the background, like this particular piece, compositionally, it's fascinating. And then you've got all the focus on the different people, the tambats, and the who are actually working on this. Yeah, really nicely done. It's a fascinating series of sketches that you've got going.
Thank you. So I've shown all the coppersmiths with a hammer in their hand, and what they are doing is they are creating concentric indentations on copper. So I'd like to show you an example.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
if you can see this clearly,
Let me just bring you up so that you can. Right.
yes, if
Okay.
you can see this, yes. So these indentations that you see, so that
Hmm.
is what they are creating with the hammer.
Hmm. Okay.
So
And
this,
we got a
sorry.
little video so you can explain that process while we watch that. Yeah. So this is what you're talking about, right?
Exactly, yes. And so this is done without any measurements. So they just turn the vessel and then they have to continuously use a hammer to create these indentations. And
Right.
this particular work is called Mathar Kam in Marathi. And
Right.
I was told that even for a small a bowl, or for example, I have this glass here. This glass this is an old one,
Let me
but this may
before.
have around 1,000 or 1,500 indentations.
Wow.
But a larger vessel could have as many as in the range of 10,000s. So that's a lot of work to be continuously using the hammer and creating indentations. And
Wow.
this matharkam is done for two reasons. One is for aesthetic purposes, and the second reason is to strengthen the structure of the copper item, because copper is a relatively soft material. So
Hmm.
I was told that the indentation strengthen the structure of the copper.
Oh, okay. Okay. That I've heard of that and makes sense. And it's interesting also how the process of beating the copper makes it more shiny. So you've
Yes,
also got a sketch of the tools that they
yes.
use.
So as you can see in all my sketches, the hammer is the most important tool for the coppersmith. And I was told that the iron that is used in making the hammerhead, that is the same that is used in railway tracks. So it is a very tough steel. And I saw the coppersmiths when they are not using the hammer. Either they are polishing it or it is kept soaked in water so that it doesn't come off loose from the wooden handle. And
Oh,
it really shines like a mirror, the hammerhead. And also the shiny head of the hammer is very essential to give the sheen on the copper when they create the indentations.
yeah. Okay. Fascinating with all the tools as well. And that's you. This is part of the alley, correct?
Yes, yes. So I
All
was
right.
sketching the hammers, as you
Oh,
can see on the right.
yeah. In the little stone bowl.
Yes,
Okay. Wow. So this is typical. I mean, this would be residents and the craftsmen would work there, live there, their
yes,
whole families
yes,
are there.
yes. There are rooms on the side, so which is not visible over here. But
Mhm.
there are these living spaces. Their homes are there on the right and left, but that's not visible over here. So this
Okay.
is just a cross section where, rather the corridor where
Mhm.
people walk around.
What was it like when you were talking to all these people and sketching them? I mean, how did they take it with you coming and deciding to sit in their space and draw them at work and all that?
They were very friendly, I would say, and
Mhm.
they were really nice people. They offered me tea every time I went,
Oh,
and they would they would be very curious to know as to what I'm sketching. Especially the children, they would keep hovering around because there's no school now.
mhm.
So the children are at home and they would be hovering around to see and
Yeah.
asking me to sketch them. I did that too.
I can only imagine. There's a great question from Eileen. She wants to know whether women do this work as well, or is it only men?
Yes, there is no rule that restricts or stops women from taking up this, but the fact remains that there are no women who are coppersmiths.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, it's very intensive work, and it looks like it's really hard. I mean, I
Yes.
work on my iPad all day, and my shoulder is aching. I can imagine doing this
Yes,
the
it's
entire
hard.
time.
Yes.
Yeah, very labor intensive. Okay, so and this particular piece, what is that? What is this guy making, for instance?
Yes, this is a very important sketch in the sense that the person in the sketch is the youngest coppersmith. He's 41 years old, And
Mhm.
as we may be aware, something that's happening across the world. So traditional handicrafts are on the verge of decline. So,
Mhm.
and that's the same story even with coppercraft, or with the tambats here. So
Mhm.
he's a 41-year-old, and he told me that although he grew up in Tambat Ali, watching his father, his uncles work on copper, he never actively pursued it. He did his graduation, and then he worked in a bank. That's what he told me. And around 2008, he left his bank job and then decided to join his father full time as a coppersmith. So I
Wow.
think that is remarkable. So,
Yes.
and he said that he was aware that the money may be less working on copper. But I think he was also acutely aware that he has to keep this craft alive,
Mm.
and this is his way of contributing to keeping the craft alive, which has been in continuous existence here in Pune since 400 years. So I think
Wow.
that's commendable.
That is, yeah, it's really remarkable because that's true. I mean, around the world, we have this sad case where old young people don't want to take up a particular craft anymore, and it could just disappear within a generation. What is he making?
Yes. There is this water heating unit that I was talking about, which is
Okay.
where water is heated only for bathing. So
This
this
is
is
what.
what he's working on, and it's called the bumper.
Okay.
One would think that bumpers may not be that much in use now, but I was surprised to learn that they on a weekly average they make and sell around 10 bumpers, which means a lot of people are buying.
Okay. Well, I'm
Yes.
glad to see that, to hear that people are buying these things. I remember when I was in India, like every household I went to when I visited friends, everyone had brassware, copperware. So at least for some time, there is a demand for these goods, and I'm very glad to see that.
Yes.
So this is what's happening here.
Yes, so I think I think my reportage would be incomplete if I don't mention the role of women. So although
Mm,
there are no women coppersmiths, but they play an equally important role in keeping the craft alive. So while the men are working on copper the whole day, the women function behind the scenes, doing household chores, which is equally important. And it's not just about physical household chores. I'd like to mention something about the lady that I've sketched here. So she was also very sweet. She offered me tea every time I visited. And I happened to ask her how did they fare during the lockdown. So
mm,
she said that at times were tough as it was, for many people around the world. But that has passed us, and we are doing well now. Things are back to normal. And the way she said it, she exuded so much confidence and that sense of empowerment. I really liked her spirit. So I was thinking, I'm sure she must have been the one. Say maybe if her husband may have been lamenting over the slump in trade during the lockdown, she must have been the one to cheer him up and say that don't worry, we are going to tide over this. She came across as that kind of a woman. I really admired that. So I requested her if I could do a sketch of her, and she
mhm.
said, "Yes, I'm cooking. You can come into my kitchen and do a sketch of me." So
Oh.
I went into the living space, which is also their kitchen and sleeping space. It's a tiny living space, and it was spotlessly clean.
Mm,
And as you can see in the sketch, there are these huge brass containers storing rice, wheat, sugar, etc. And it's a lot of maintenance work, keeping brass and copper items. But they were spotlessly clean and well polished, and the entire living space. That was in contrast to what you see outside, where the coppersmiths are actually working. Inside, it was like spotlessly clean. So she's an example of of a woman, the wife of a coppersmith, who's an equal contributor in the story.
yeah, I remember this phrase that I learned while I was in India because I have so much respect for the Indian woman and how she's very strong and supportive. The power of the Gruha Lakshmi Tattva, I think that's one word, which is basically the power of the nurturing woman who is taking care of the household, right? Yeah, that's okay. I'm so glad you got a picture of that lady as well.
But I
Okay.
think that's true of women around the world.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I see that in many, many sketchers. Okay, here's another example.
Yes, of this is a common laundry area, so I thought this would make for a good composition. The woman washing clothes.
Wow. Yeah, this is a great composition too. Yeah, I love the storytelling in your sketches. Okay, and this is something about the process. So take us through a little bit of through some of the steps.
Yes, I thought while I'm sketching these individual coppersmiths, it would also be a good idea to draw out the process of the entire making of a copper vessel. So the first step is that the copper discs or the copper circles and squares. I think it's these are factory cut. The sheets of copper are cut in circles and squares and then sent to the coppersmiths. And from here, the handicraft work begins. Sorry. So since so copper is first, it's treated on fire so that it becomes a little soft and it becomes a little more malleable. And then the third step is that they give it whatever shape, say a glass or different shapes for different purposes. The fourth is that they treat it with sulfuric acid, a diluted sulfuric acid. So I asked them why, and they said this is to remove any debris that may be on copper. And then it's washed under running water to wash off the sulfuric acid. And then they also scrub it with tamarind pulp. So this is again to give a sheen to the copper. And then again it's washed under running water so that the tamarind pulp goes away, and then it is left to dry in the sun. So again copper is not wiped dry because it leaves water stains, so it is left to air dry or left under the sun to dry. And then the important work of the matharkam starts, where the coppersmiths use their hammer to create these concentric indentations. And then after that, the last part is that some copper items may require handles or different embellishments. So that is the last stage. So this is in short how it
The
happens.
entire process.
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah. And these are some of the vessels that you were talking about.
Yes. So I found it really interesting that over the centuries, some of these shapes and forms of some copper vessels have remained unchanged. So the first one is a drinking water dispenser. Even I have that in my house, and a tap is attached, of course. And then there is the second one is for storing water. It could be any water, and the third is only for storing bathing water. So depending on the shape, it has different purposes. And the fourth one you can see that's for storing milk,
Uh-huh.
and the fourth one is for cooking meat and fish, because in India some people follow vegetarianism. On certain days they don't have meat and fish, so there's a specific cooking vessel assigned for that. And then there's what I showed you, this one. This is for drinking water.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Let's,
and
let's
and
pull
then
that up.
there is, yes, there is, yes.
Just curious, you've got so many different shapes there. Are
Yeah.
the different shapes, are there practical reasons for these shapes, or is it just a process to help to distinguish the purpose for each item?
I'm not quite sure about that, but I think over a period of time, maybe one shape has got assigned to one particular purpose.
Mhm. Okay.
And one more thing is that the utensils, copper vessels that are used for cooking, they are lined with tin,
Mm.
because otherwise it cannot be used. You cannot put it on fire. You cannot heat things in that. So it's
Oh,
lined with tin, the ones that are used for cooking.
oh, okay. Yeah. That would also help solve the issue of oxidation that you
Yes.
can't see.
Yes.
Yeah. One thing that some people may not be aware of, when you polish metal, especially copper with tamarind, it gives the metal a rosy tinge. I've actually done it before, and it's fascinating to see
Okay. Yes.
with the tamarind pulp. Okay. Now
Yes.
people are wondering, like, Rob, why are you? Well, That's another story, people. That's another story. Okay, the bamba that you were telling us about. Um,
Yes. So this is what the 41-year-old coppersmith was working on. So this is a huge copper water heating vessel, which is around 2 feet tall. As I said a few minutes earlier, so they make around 10 of these on a weekly basis. So there are people buying these even now, which is like really heartening to hear. And they
mm,
also make miniatures of these. For example, say in an apartment like mine, I cannot use this because it's really huge. So and just to cherish a sense of nostalgia, I may want a miniature one and keep it for show. So they also make that.
wow. Well, I'm glad that they think of all these things, because the more they keep it alive, the more people want to hold on to these things, the more the craft will survive.
Yes.
But I assume then that the issue is not lack of supply, it is the lack of people who want to continue creating these things.
Yes.
Mm.
That's very true, because in fact I spoke to some of the older coppersmiths. So what they said is that the younger generation does not want to take this up. There are many reasons.
Mhm.
I think it's also kind of aspirational thing that you because of industrialization and globalization, it's an aspirational thing that they don't want to do this, where the clothes get dirty on a daily basis.
Yeah.
They want to dress up well, and then they
Work in
want
air conditioning.
Yes, yes. So it's also an aspirational thing, and it remains a fact that for people involved in handicrafts, there's no constant supply of income.
Mm.
So there is no security. For example, there's no government pension, or there's no constant source of. So again, during the monsoon, they switch to other things like making Ganesha idols,
Mm.
because during the monsoon I was told for 2 3 months, that is during the rainy season, so
Mhm.
they don't work on copper. They make other things like Ganesha idols for the Ganesh festival. So
Okay.
again, yes, so these are some of the reasons why the younger generation is not taking this up.
Right. Okay. That's so sad, but I hope something works out. Like that gentleman who is 41, you were saying gave up his banking job to join the family business. That's quite remarkable.
Yes.
Okay. This library, tell us what this is about.
Yes, so I found it really interesting that the Coppersmiths community, they had established a library 100 years ago in the vicinity of where they live, and this library is open to everyone. It's not that only members of their community can take a membership, and
Mhm.
the membership fees is really less. It's like rupees 40 a month, which is very very nominal, even by Indian standards. And I went and had a look at some of these books. So they had fiction, they had biographies, and
Oh,
some travel magazines in Marathi and English.
okay.
So there is a sense of progressive thinking that they have, and I was really happy to see that.
Hmm.
And I happened to visit the library in the evening. So outside the library, they have put up these benches and small sitting area where I saw senior citizens chatting and then reading the magazine and the newspaper. So that is their way of socializing, and so the Coppersmiths community have provided that kind of a space where
Yeah,
people can socialize, where people can read and gain knowledge.
yeah, and to pull the community together in other ways,
Yes,
which
true.
brings us to this piece. Um, this is a temple, I assume.
Yes, it's a temple. So
Mhm.
in India, we have this tradition where communities they worship a particular goddess, and it's called the Kula Devi. The goddess whom the coppersmiths worship, she's Mother Kali. And very
Mhm.
interestingly, the word Kali is derived from the Sanskrit word Kal, which means time. And
Mhm.
while I sat outside the temple sketching this, I couldn't help feeling that somehow the goddess is trying to prolong the existence of this craft, and so that is what I felt. And interestingly, this the idol of the goddess is around 250 to 300 years old.
Wow.
And yes, and the structure that you see on the right hand side, so that is a relatively a new building that's around 120 years old. That is what they told me. And another a strange coincidence that is that even as we speak, so today and tomorrow they are celebrating the birthday of the goddess in this particular place. So that is another coincidence. Yes.
Wow. Okay. That is a really, really, really comprehensive reportage. I mean, the space of a few minutes, you're given an idea how they live, how they work, not just how the craftsmen, the Tambats work, but also what their families are like, the women in the household, things that are used. Where do people, like, say, if I were to move to Pune, for instance, and I wanted to buy some of these things, do people actually go to this Tambat alley and buy, or do they go to a store, or how does that work?
Yes, so while the Tambats they live and work there, I don't think they actively sell from that space. So there are shops dedicated. Again, this is in Old Pune. There are shops selling copper vessels. So, for
Mhm.
example, even when I was buying this, I bought this directly from the coppersmith.
Mhm.
But I think they have a standard rate fixed. That certain items should be sold at one particular price. So he
Mhm.
called up somebody. I think he called up the shop owner to a shop owner to ask what price he was selling at, and that's how he told me. So
I
I
see.
don't think they actively sell, but yes, like for a person like me or somebody who's just going, and
Yeah.
if they want to buy, they wouldn't say no.
Okay. But yeah, I think it makes sense also that there is some kind of organization around the price so that it's
Yes,
not manipulated. Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
true.
That's been really, really fascinating. Like Anne Marie said, it's very comprehensive and a lot of depth as well. So we so appreciate that. Okay, so as we jump into this, I love how the narrative that you and Chris, you are still there. Okay, for this bit, I'm just going to pull Chris back. Hey, Chris.
Hey,
Yeah, so as we come to the end of the show, I thought I'm going to pull you back on so that we can talk about the challenge that the two of you have come together to create for our audience. Everyone always looks forward to that. And I think the narrative that you've both brought, I mean, saving something that is possibly disappearing. I love that. So, okay, Chris, tell us a little bit about the challenge.
okay, well, one thing that as a continuing theme in my work beyond just this project, I like to get to things, either buildings, businesses, sites that I know or suspect are not long for this world. Um, you know, a lot of times old buildings or a stretch of street that I know is going to be developed and replaced with awful glass condos. So that's kind of a recurring theme for my work. So with and with the situation with performing arts centers, a lot of them are in danger. And Priya's just had this fascinating report about this whole craftsmanship, which is maybe not long for this world. So the challenge is to find a place or a thing or an activity in your world, in your neighborhood, uh, that you want to record for posterity because it may not be there in the near future.
And in case you're curious, viewers out there, this title "Sketch It Before It's Gone." This was inspired by by something that Chris actually said while we were preparing everything. Sketch it before it's gone. I mean, it doesn't get clearer than that. Find something. So Priya, we thank you so much for providing the sketch for this to illustrate this challenge.
Thank
Um,
you.
was this also maybe you want to tell us a little bit about this guy?
Yes, so I have a story related to him. So, around 3 weeks ago, I got a call from a person who identified himself as a son of this coppersmith. His name is Ramnath Parange, the coppersmith in the sketch. And he said, "Can you please give me the sketch? This is my father, and I want to frame the sketch and put it up in my house." I said it's in a sketchbook, so I can't tear out the pages, but I can scan and send it to you. So I
Wow.
asked him, "Are you also a coppersmith?" He said, no, my father asked me not to join this trade because it's hard work and less money. That's what he told me. So I think that says a lot about, how in general parents want a better future for their
Mhm.
children, as well as about how tough this job is.
Right. Okay. Well, it's very poignant. So thank you for this example and for the story that you've told us today. And Chris, you've given us this piece as an example. Take us through that.
Yeah, this is a piece that it's not part of this current project. I actually did it 2 or 3 years ago.
Mhm.
This is a place called the 13th Street Repertory Theater,
Mhm.
which is actually in the basement of this brownstone. And it's been there since, I think, 1972. This woman named Edith O'Hara started it. And it was like a real kind of bohemian, hippie dippy kind of place. A lot of colorful characters who would actually maybe even live in these apartments. And there was a complicated legal situation with the ownership where the bottom line, the upshot of it was like, okay, you and your theater can stay here for the rest of your life, Edith O'Hara. And she just
Wow.
passed away at the age of 103 about 2 or 3 months ago. So this is a place that combined with it being shut down with the pandemic, I'm not sure how much longer this thing's going to be there.
Wow.
Again, it's been a fixture there since for 40 plus years. So
Okay.
this is the sort of thing where like, well, at least it lives on in my sketchbook,
Okay.
if nothing else.
Well, perfect example of sketch it before it's gone. Truly. I'm sure that's going to inspire lots of you out there, viewers. We would like to thank our guests, Chris Brown and Priya Krishnan Das. Thank you both so much for joining us on this show.
Thank you.
Before we
Thank you
say
for
goodbye,
having us.
Thank you.
sorry? Bring your mug up. Yes. Clink virtually. Thank you again.
Thank you
Very,
so
very
much.
inspiring. Yeah. Also, remember those of you who are going to take part in the challenge, hashtag USk Talks challenge, hashtag also Chris and Priya so they can pop over, see what you've been doing. And I hope you guys are all going to be very inspired. Chris and Priya, I hope to join you some point in your city and sketch. But
Yes,
again,
that would be great.
thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank
Okay.
you for having us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. It's been a pleasure talking to Chris and Priya. I hope you guys got some amazing inspiration. It's fascinating also for me to see how different sketches around the world have taken this whole reportage proposal challenge thing, and they've created fascinating stories from across the world. I'm sure that you in your city out there, you also have some amazing stories to tell. I saw Ludi in our coordinator typing in and explaining more about the reportage challenge. It's not a USk Talks challenge. It is an urban sketches reportage challenge. So check out there's more info on the website as well as Instagram, Facebook, etc. More information about that. So I hope you have a great week. Stay safe. Keep sketching. Be good. Be nice. And we'll see you next week. We have another amazing episode for you as always. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Rob. And yeah, till